Hi, I'm Tina, MSearch's founder and president. Welcome to this episode of Leadership Delivered, where we discuss and unpack the big ideas behind what's happening in business and recruitment today.
Hi guys, Samer here from MSearch. Welcome to Leadership Delivered. Today's topic is going to be about how to stand out in a competitive job market. So today with us we have Gianna Prosperi, who is one of our managers in the executive search team. Gianna, welcome to the podcast. Could you give a quick background and introduction to our listeners?
Of course, happy to be here. So, I am Gianna. I am the manager of executive search here at MSearch. I have over a decade worth of recruiting experience, both in established organizations as well as two health tech startups. One of my most predominant experience actually was back in 2021 to about 2023 while working at Capsule. We grew from 7 markets to 25. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of craziness, but I ended up hiring in a matter of 2 years, 100 candidates across our commercial organization.
And this is very much like post-pandemic. So was this more
hmm
like remote cultured work, or was this very much like we're seeing people transition back into the offices?
Yeah.
Where
So
was it
during that
based?
time, it was remote, although our commercial teams, some of our sales reps, if you will, were going in field to medical practices across
Okay,
their territory. So
got
they,
it.
although they, didn't report to an office location, they actually were in field meeting with doctors and their staff face to face.
And when you were doing like kind of the interview process and stuff, was this very much again, was it like remote, or did you have some
Oh, what I
interactions
was
with them?
interviewing them for.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it was all virtual. And then they would meet with the hiring manager. Usually, I think the last round was potentially face to face, depending on the preference of the manager.
got it, got it.
hmm
And you said 100 people in the 2 years that you were there. So like, I'm assuming these weren't just like 100 people who you just sat down with and were like, yeah, perfect, great. That was it. I'm assuming you probably interviewed hundreds of people prior to this. I mean, what was that process like? And kind of like in line with the theme, what will be really interesting to the viewers is understanding how many people did you actually speak to in the 2 years? You selected 100 people out of that list. I guess we would love to know, like, what was it about those 100 people that really stood out to you?
Yeah. So if I were speaking with 25 to about 30 candidates per week, those were our like recruiter screens that I did. That would mean that I probably spoke to well over 2,000 over 2 years. So obviously quite busy. I was
Yeah.
in like, at least 5 screens per day. But it was a lot of fun. And what was your other question, Samir?
So you spoke to 2,000 people across the 2 years. Out of the 2,000 people, you selected 100 people for this position.
hmm
What was it about those 100 people that really stood out? Like, what were you looking for when you were kind of helping the company go through this recruitment
Yeah.
process?
So there is some tangible and intangible skills and personality traits that we'd be looking for. I think one of the most important things, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know you've worked for some startups, Samir, but the attachment to the mission, right? It's in a building phase, they're scaling, they're growing, and it's all exciting, but those candidates really need to be aligned to that mission. So we did look for people that were excited about our product. We were a digital pharmacy, so we impacted patient lives, right? So, like, someone
Yeah.
that was excited about that was really important to us. And that aligned to our values as well. So, those were some intangible things that we'd be looking for in terms of mission alignment and culture.
Yeah.
I would also say someone that's really adaptable, gritty, wants to just, do the work, right? And someone that's really, really proactive was really important to us as well. And
Yeah.
here, I know you've worked for startups too. It's kind of like the Wild West. There's a lot of like 911s, right? Everything is like very reactive. So someone that could be
Just
even
being
proactive,
proactive is
yes, would be
key for
nice.
sure.
Yes.
I mean, out of interest, like I can definitely share a story or two. But like, how did you find that like a candidate can show that they're being proactive prior to even being in the role? Like, what are the
hmm
things that they need to be thinking of to get in
Yeah.
front of the mind of the founder and say, you need to hire me?
Yeah. That's
How do you
great.
show that?
Yeah, I would say doing your due diligence prior to interviews. I mean, even before the recruiter screen, right? Doing the research behind what the product actually is, what it does, the history, really understand the business model
The
of the
background of it.
organization that you're interviewing. And then even taking it a step further, and perhaps I would suggest doing this after the recruiter screen, or maybe the initial conversation that you have if maybe they don't have a recruiting team on staff yet, if they're a bit of a smaller organization. I would suggest reaching out to potential peers or other people cross functionally throughout the organization, because as much as they're interviewing you through this process, you're interviewing them too. So getting familiar with maybe who could be your future coworkers really
Okay.
is
Yeah.
awesome for the
Yeah.
candidate, but also it really shows you taking initiative, that you're really
Yeah.
interested in that role. And more often than not, in my experience working with, many sales leaders, they like that. They appreciate that. They tell me that that's how they would approach, like the candidate may approach their sales process, right? You want to get
Yes.
everybody involved. So taking that initiative and reaching out to others that you may have not met through the interview process standard, right?
Yeah.
Could be a way to stand out as well.
No, for sure, for sure. I feel like this reminds me of so when I left the capital markets after about 3 years, I kind of fell into the startup world. And
Hmm.
how I did that is I was kind of looking at my next opportunity when I left finance. And, tech wasn't something that I was looking to go into per se, but I ended up finding this business on a startup website because all my friends used to always say, look, you need to go into startups. Like it's very you, it's hustle and bustle. Like, and I love that idea of like working in a kind of a company where you could really grow with. Um, Larger corporations, just it wasn't really my thing. And
For
I
everybody.
sent, yeah, and I remember sending my resume. I should be saying sending my CV because I was living in the UK at the time and we don't say resume. But I sent my CV across to the founder of a company called Menu Spring. Very cool business. I just saw a quick 2 minute clip on the video. It was all about showing real-time availability of restaurants nearby. And the way you would find those restaurants is through a dish level search. And we're talking, this is over like almost 10 years back now. So, you know, the algorithms of these like kind of food apps were nowhere near as sophisticated as they are today. And I remember sending him my CV or resume, and I said to him, "Hey, I saw this position open. They were looking for someone to head up their sales team, and we'd love to have a chat." Sent in my resume. Probably within an hour, small company. Granted, if the bigger the company, the longer it may take for them to reply back. But in about an hour later, I get a message back from the founder who said, "We're not really looking for a financier. We need someone with sales experience, etc." Never done a day of sales in my life. But I took this as an opportunity that I know what he looks like. I know where his office is. Like trust me, I'm not a stalker when I say this, but I had to kind of show him that I'm being a bit proactive to your point. I went straight to the area that his office was located, and I just happened to basically knock on his door. And I said, "Oh, I was in the area, so I thought I'll just drop by and say hi." I knew what he looked like, so he was quite shocked when he saw me in his office like 2 hours later. And yeah, long story short, I ended up speaking to him. I guess I was selling myself. I was very much in person, telling him what I was about, and he told me the concept. On the way home, I decided to do a walk where I ended up selling his product to three different restaurants on the way home. Fast forward 2 months later, I ended up living with the guy. We were three of us running this startup, and it was probably one of the most amazing experiences of my life. But couldn't agree more. Like being proactive, and to your point, you got to know what your missions have to be aligned. So I felt like if you can understand from the consumer's perspective of that position or the outcome of what the goal is, I think what re-engineering yourself to work backwards from there will always serve its value.
Yeah, yeah. And that shows great initiative. I mean, you sold three restaurants, you said, without even having an offer. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, literally, I just said like on the way home, I was like, let me just see, like, I think it's a great idea,
Yeah.
but I guess the key of this business is to understand like what the operator buy into the
Yeah.
concept. So yeah, it was literally
That's
a
awesome.
conversation, and I kind of walked in there saying, I don't work for this company, but I had a
Mhm.
really interesting chat and I just want to understand, would this work for you?
Yeah.
And honestly, that was probably one of the most like successful sales tactics I can give anyone listening right
Yeah.
now. I was never trying to oversell anything here because when you hear the word sales, even in itself, it sounds a bit like, oh, it's overnight push. It's not really building a partnership. Like, but
Right.
when you come across like, I'm not really looking for anything from you. I just want to make you aware
Right.
that there's something that I've seen that seems pretty damn cool. It looks like it could actually help you. What's
Hmm.
your thought on this? You'll be surprised how many people will be very like for like, all right, I'll give you a coffee and sit down and let's have a chat.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm
but
sure
I
that
agree.
chat that you had with the restaurant owners or staff, whomever you were speaking with, was very valuable as you even ramped up into that role, right? And
Yeah.
understanding their thought process behind the product, why it would be that valuable for
Yeah.
them.
You learn your audience, right? And I
Mhm.
feel like that's so important. It was all about making sure you understand your operator or your end customer, and the better you understood them, the more you could articulate better in your new position, right?
Mhm.
And I think there's so many like subcategories that can blossom from that, like how you lead your team, for example, and how you navigate through obstacles. If you really and truly understand and the mission alignment, to your point, and understand from the consumer's perspective of why are you doing what you're doing, it will all fall into place. So from my perspective, it was like, yes, when I was in the restaurant tech space with Menu Spring, it was all about how easy can you make it for a consumer to find something, and then how easy can you fulfill that. So I think when you position yourself from that side of the picture, I think amazing things can come from it. Think about like being the person who needs that and work backwards.
Right. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And what I keep hearing is just like your genuine interest and enthusiasm. Because think about if you were able to wake up every day excited about like selling a product and partnering with your clients. I
Yeah,
mean, that makes it so much easier to one, do the job, but make those sales and be successful.
yeah. No, for sure. I
Hmm.
think from my perspective, the best salespeople I've ever come across are the ones who will never even insinuate that. They are
Hmm.
very much, they don't try to oversell. They are very much themselves. They build trust, they build
Hmm.
honesty, they build a relationship. So for me, I've always looked at the word partnerships as opposed to sales. And
Hmm.
I think if you can build that kind of longevity and trust with your client, great things can come from it from a
Yeah.
partnership perspective.
Yeah.
Just going back a bit about what you mentioned about, that you hired 100 people. These guys were all like, they were aligned on the mission. They had a good cultural fit. The ones that really caught your eye were the ones who navigated through the systems, which completely agree. Like you need to be able to speak to people like in the org structure.
Hmm.
Because for me as a hiring manager, I'm also looking at my team to be like, how much have you done to really get yourself in front of me? Like,
Hmm.
do you really want this? Which brings me to the question that you've done all these things, right?
Hmm.
What would you say is the right touch points? Because I think we've all been in that situation where you're navigating, you're speaking. A lot of the times you may not hear back, but I'm a big believer that you keep persevering through it. Like you will maybe get a message or two back. Do you have any advice up to kind of candidates who are, they're aligned with the mission, they are aligned with the culture, they are navigating through the org structure to show their interest and passion of the product?
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of follow-up questions maybe they can ask during those interactions
Hmm.
that won't kind of like, annoy someone if you're constantly trying to chase them up for a
Right.
response?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would mention is that during interviews, there should be a time for like closing questions, of course, right? Usually,
Yeah.
the person interviewing the candidate will allow for 5 minutes of questions. I would always suggest towards the end of that to ask some closing questions. Those can include one, for example, I always coach candidates on utilizing something like this is, do you have any hesitations on my ability to do this job? Right. And
Yeah.
you do have to be prepared for some sort of objection, potentially, right? There's a chance for that. And maybe overcoming that with, you know what, actually, I do have XYZ experience, right? Or, you know what, I'm a little bit lighter on that, but here's what I'm going to do to overcome that, right? And that really gives you instant feedback, and you might be able to tell where you stand with
Yeah.
the company. The other questions I would ask is, what is the next step from here, right? In sales, if you think about that, you always want that next step with the client. I would treat it
Yeah.
as such with an interview
Same
process
thing.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And that also gives you a timeline of when you should be expecting to hear from them too. You know, they might say, you know what, we have some other conversations I need to wrap up this week, but we should be able to get back to you by Monday or Tuesday next week. So if you don't hear from them by Tuesday end of day or Wednesday that following week, I would suggest to follow up at that point, right?
Yeah.
You know, it just really sets those expectations for the candidates
And
to
the
know
tone as well. I love that question you said. And just to re-articulate that, it's you're basically getting you're basically putting them on the spot essentially by saying, is there
Mhm.
anything that I have not shown you that you're looking for? So you're actually making them question themselves like, they've done X, Y, Z correct. Is there anything? And this is your time to like, you're either going to hear something and then it's how you react to that, or it's very much like, nope, things are fine, that you've given them the
Yeah.
opportunity to say if there was an obstacle,
Hmm.
and then you're following it up afterwards. So let's say you've done that.
Hmm.
What if you then don't hear back? Like this is something which I'm sure people out there are going through a lot. Like I went through this,
Hmm.
in the last quarter of the year when I was looking at what is it I want to get into for my next
Right.
kind of position. And for me, it was always those touch points. And I felt like the companies that did give me those touch points back were the companies that I'm always going to remember.
Unfortunately, it happens more than we like, right? But I
Yeah,
think perhaps the candidate needs to ask themselves a different question. Is that an organization that you really want to work for?
yeah,
If you've put all that interest, effort, you did everything that you could to stand out, you interacted with peers, you asked the right questions, you did all that research, and they haven't given you closure or next steps, you know? So I think
right,
that
right.
that might be a better question to ask yourself.
Is this what you really want in the first place?
Exactly. Because I think that
Yeah, no, no,
shows
absolutely.
a lot about the company culture, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean that's honestly what I would suggest, because it's not at the end of the day just a job. So you're going to be working with these people a lot, right? It's Monday through
yeah,
Friday, sometimes more than that. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, no,
important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree. So, what would you say then, like, just to recap, as far as what we have discussed, the three key things
Hmm.
that you would give as advice to anyone in the job market right now? Like, how would you stand out? We've already touched on a lot about culture and fit, but like, if you had to really summarize what we've said in three key points,
Yeah.
as key takeaways to our listeners, what would they be?
Yeah. I would say, one, utilize LinkedIn to your advantage. I think that
Yeah.
there's other job sites that could be a little bit less saturated, but use it as a research tool, because you can
Yes.
really dive deep into the organization and just find peers and have conversations. You don't need to
Yeah.
approach it so formal. You could just be like, "Hey, I applied to XYZ job and I see you've been there for 2 years. I'd love to get
Yeah.
your opinion. I'd love to learn more." Most often, if they're pretty active on LinkedIn, they'll respond and be willing to lend an ear. And doing that, you'll have an
Because
advocate.
you're being vulnerable, you're
Yeah,
asking for help.
yeah, you're just
So,
being a human
okay.
at the end of the day. So, I
Yeah.
think doing that, and then you'll even past that have an internal advocate for you potentially. They
Yeah.
might be like, you know what? I loved this conversation with you. I think you would be awesome here. I
Yeah.
actually know the manager that's hiring that role that you're really interested in. I'm gonna
Yeah.
like tell them to speak with you. And you could kind of get past that applicant pool that seems
Absolutely.
oversaturated, right? And so daunting. You could do it
Yeah.
that way, right? And that's not always going to happen, but it can. And I've seen it to be true even from my boyfriend, who was recently on the job market, laid off for about a month, and he got past that applicant pool that way. I think like in a matter of a month. So I would definitely suggest that. Um, what else would I be able to suggest to candidates? Yeah, so my second piece of advice for anybody on the job market right now is to not only use LinkedIn as a job search tool. I think that there's some others out there that would be less saturated, and not every company has their jobs posted on LinkedIn, as it's pretty expensive actually. So I would
Okay.
suggest even going to the internal sites that maybe have interest to you, some different, target companies of yours, doing that research.
Yeah.
and then looking at their
They're more
internal.
likely to keep it kind of updated on their own
Yes,
website.
yes.
Yeah. Do you
And
know
then
there
if
was a very crazy statistic that I think they said like 70% of roles on LinkedIn were actually redundant.
Yeah, they could be what recruiters call an evergreen rec. If maybe it's
Right.
like something that they hire through the year and it never really
It doesn't come
closes.
to
It's kind of
fruition.
like sales sometimes that is the case because it's kind of a revolving door if the person isn't performing and then they need to, backfill
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Yeah, there are some evergreen and you'll even see some companies also will put like a create your own role for like
Yeah.
applicants to
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I've
apply
seen
if they're
that.
interested in the organization. And actually, I've found some interesting candidates from those types of postings
Yeah.
internally, and we'll look through them. But yeah, what I was going to also mention was if, startups or those types of like tech companies are of
Yeah.
interest to you as a candidate, I would look at VC firms and look at their sites. Oftentimes they'll put their portfolio's job
Yeah. Yeah.
opening
Yeah.
on there, and I don't think many people know that. So I would suggest doing that. I know there's like Y Combinator, which is a incubator. They have a ton of roles posted, and then there's also smaller VC firms out there that I've even researched.
Yeah.
I was on the job market myself for organizations that maybe we've never even heard of. Maybe they're like
Yeah.
seed or Series A, early stage startups that are not posting on LinkedIn and they don't have
Yeah.
that type of visibility. So I would definitely suggest that as well.
No, agreed. Yeah, I think there's quite a few like VCs will always typically have like a portfolio section within lists of the companies. But to
Right.
your point, I've started seeing quite a few now that there is actually a job board that
Mm-hmm.
stays relatively active, and you can see that they have a lot more control. So,
Right.
okay, so we have LinkedIn, use it as a research tool to kind of
Mm-hmm.
like navigate through the org charts and speak to people in those teams. We've got two, which is basically look at the actual websites of the companies themselves. They'll typically keep it more up to date. And also, if they are in a startup or scale up kind of world, like look into the investors who've backed those companies, look at their websites and understand like some of them will actually have job boards where,
Yep.
you'll see those roles. Okay. Third one.
Yep. So I would say proactiveness, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned before, like going through the organization chart and looking for peers to speak with. I think that
Yeah.
that's one way that you could be proactive. Another way too is looking for events in your area locally. I don't think many people will go out of their way to meet with founders face to face or CEOs or leaders within their industry. And I mean, I do that myself, obviously, for the business that we're in, but I see some candidates there that are just looking for a job and they're interested in whatever field the event is, about. And I
Yeah.
think I'm like, wow, they're like hustling, right? Not
Oh,
there's
yeah.
it's not that often that I think I've came across like two candidates that have done that. And I think that that's
Yeah.
awesome because not many people will go out of their way, get out of their home or after a work day, go into, an event. It
Yeah.
is sometimes, utilizing your social battery, but I think that that could be an advantage to a candidate.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I think you've really summarized it well. And for those who are listening, I mean, I guess to top what you've just said, the only advice I could add to that is like you just have to persevere through it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of it's in our own minds. Like sometimes I feel when you are in the job market, you are applying for, you know, it could be hundreds of roles you've applied for. We don't know everyone's position. People get very nervous. They're like, oh, I've got to pay rent. I've got to do this. I've got to apply for something, and it can be quite demoralizing when you're not even hearing back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes what happens is people look at these job specs and they get very like compartmentalized as far as like, oh, I didn't get this job. I'm not good enough. So if I could shed any light from my own experience, it would be like you need to keep pushing one foot forward, take every day as it comes. You may not hear back that day, but that's fine. Change
Right.
your strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So, like to your point, I 100% agree with that because I was using LinkedIn initially as the kind of the source of truth to be like, this is where I'm going to go and apply for all my
Mm-hmm.
jobs. When I started pivoting and using it as a source to like navigate through org charts, speaking to people, I started befriending people in the org structures. And then without me realizing it, a lot of these companies actually had internal referral schemes.
Right.
So if they like you, they're going to be wanting to put you forward. You look at the websites, because when you look at a company's website, you start getting a feel for their culture, their language, how they speak to the audience, and use that. Use that when you
Mhm.
send them a cover note. Use that when you present yourself to them. Make sure you can reiterate the values, because you're hiring someone. Like, it's a big deal, like you're here to, especially as a commercial position, you need to take our business to the next level of growth.
Mhm.
Show me that you understand who you're talking to. Show me you understand you've done your due diligence. And your third point about being proactive, 100%. I think if you do those first two steps, you are showing that you are being proactive and how much you really
Mhm.
want the work. So, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, look.
I have a question for you, Samir.
Oh, okay.
All
All right,
right.
let's go.
So I don't think our listeners know that, you reached out to me and applied to our internal role for our VP
Yes,
of growth.
I
Um,
did. I did.
and
Yeah.
you did take it that step further and you directly messaged me as you saw me on the job posting as, the
Yeah.
hiring team, right? And that stood out to me because then I actually looked at I mean, I was obviously looking through the applications, but your name then stood out to me because I saw that message.
Yeah.
So I'd like to understand, obviously, I'm telling everybody to do that, but you did that without maybe any guidance or obviously listening to this podcast today. So what was your thought process in why you reached out to me?
That's a good question. I think, like, and in full transparency, right? Like, I was in the job market for about 3.5 months, and I think, to the point I mentioned earlier, I had to like change my tactic. When I started looking for roles, I thought it's a numbers game. Get your resume out everywhere. And the way I did that, LinkedIn has that, what's it called? The quick something.
Oh, quick apply or easy apply.
Easy apply.
Hmm.
After like 3 days of just blitzing probably 1,000 of those, I was like, yeah, this is not going to happen. Like, I'm not hearing anything back right now. Then I started like actually writing cover letters and like, sending my resume, filling out all these different questions they had. You hear these automatic messages, we'll get in touch with you if there's any interest. And again, you don't know how this is happening. It wasn't until much later I found out like there's a huge, system. It's not as simple as just like, they may not even look at your resume. They may not even see it. You're looking at so many different AI agents out there who are basically streamlining and cutting through all this thousands of resumes they receive. So you may not be using the right word. Your format might be incorrect. So a lot of that can be very demoralizing. And I think there was a moment where I was like, what is it that I was good at? It was good at speaking with people and showing them who I am and so forth. So if I truly want something, you can't surely sit down and expect you're going to send a resume and then you hope everything will just come and fall in your lap. It just doesn't work that way, right? So I felt I had to take control of the situation. I felt I did my research on M Search. I understood it was like a boutique executive search firm based in Miami. I read the org chart. I knew exactly who the founder was. I knew yourself. I knew Fernando. I knew Anna Maria. I knew Anne, the chief growth officer, as well. And I thought, like, if I'm going to really put my best foot forward, once I've submitted my resume, what is the best way to get in front of them, right? I didn't want to send a generic email. I knew that you were the one who was hiring for that role, so I wanted to get in front of you. So I think I just slipped into the LinkedIn DMs and been just like, "Hi, Gianna, like pleasure being acquainted with you. I just saw that you were looking for this. Would love to just jump on a call and learn more about the position." I was trying to be a bit more. Um, I wanted to ask questions.
Yeah.
I was curious, and I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what got me into that stage. And then obviously when we spoke, I said this to Tina. I think you're a testament to the company, of everything it stands for. And it was funny because actually, like, I was never looking at that. If you remember, like when we spoke, I was thinking, hey, this is a head of growth role. What's the name of the company? Tell me more about your client, thinking it was one of your portfolio clients. When actually it was like, no, it's actually with us. And I was like, well, we're on this call. Let's talk. Like, let's have a chat. And I think that probably like broke the ice quite quickly. And I felt that we just had a nice free conversation. And again, you didn't sell me the company. You didn't sell me anything, actually. You just were very real and true about like what is it that we do good at. And since I've joined, that's all I've seen. Some of the logos we've won, some we obviously can't mention. I'm super impressed. And this is all done by a boutique search firm based in Miami. Like, it is very much that concierge approach to recruitment. It's that white glove service that I'm seeing, and I see this now every day on our calls of like when we speak to clients, we have a portal that, they can like, essentially update them on everything and who we're speaking with. It shows our due diligence and how much we really care for the clients we work with. And look, we're a retained company, so we don't take on searches that we feel can jeopardize that, growth and that reputation. So there's a lot. I think there's been more learnings than I imagined, but I hope I've answered the question in a very long-winded way. But like, I think how you presented yourself, but I felt I had to be curious. I had to be proactive, yeah,
And I
that
think it
helped.
was an organic conversation too, because you and Tina even had some
Yeah.
connections outside
Well,
of like the
we were
professional
speaking, and
space.
yeah,
Yeah.
like we were speaking, and she has this bookshelf behind her, and I see this name, and like in true like post-COVID tech fashion, the internet slightly like jiggled a bit, and I didn't really catch what she was saying, but I did notice she was pointing behind her, and there was a book, and it said Farouk, and I was like, wait, hold on, I misunderstood it. What's the relationship with you and the book? That's Farouk Engineer. And for those who don't know, Farouk Engineer is one of the most like phenomenal Test cricketers for India. He's one of the greats. And she was like, "That's my dad." And it wasn't even the starstruck moment of like who he was. It was more like, "Wait a minute, Farouk Engineer's your dad." I've met your dad several times. Like he's actually had dinner on my table in London. Like him and my dad go back, generations. And my dad set up this cricket club 50 years ago, the Kensington Cricket Club. It was like the universe was designed to put us together. And now meeting Tina, I mean, yeah, like I feel like we're very similar in many
Yeah,
ways. So yeah, it was a blessing in disguise for
it
sure.
was. It was meant to be. Everything happens for a
Absolutely.
reason.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I have a question for you. So, and this is going to be more of a personal question as opposed to a work-related question.
Right.
Good.
Hmm.
All right. If you had a celebrity narrate your daily life, who would it be and why?
So you're asking me what celebrity would play me?
Narrate your story.
No. Oh, narrate my story.
I mean, you could do both actually, play and narrate.
Oh boy. All right.
I think narrate first and foremost because it will set the tone of like, yeah.
Hmm. All right. I have to think of someone. This is a good question. I've never been asked this question before. And now I'm blanking. I'm like, I've never heard of a celebrity in my entire life.
Yeah,
Can't think of anybody.
you could.
Ah, okay. Hold on. Hmm.
I have a name that I'm not going to say it until you mention a name first because I feel when I say the name, I'm almost certain you're going to agree with it and just be like, yes, this is the best person to narrate
Yeah.
anyone's life story.
I was trying to think of a woman, honestly, because I feel like, I don't know, as a woman, should my life be narrated by
Yeah.
one? But my first one came to mind, like, because I feel like I think he narrates everything and it always like plays God in movies. It's like Morgan Freeman,
Morgan
right?
Freeman.
But then I'm
Okay,
like,
fair, fair.
yeah, yeah. But
Go on.
yeah, but like then I'm like, I don't know, would that like be weird? Like as a 4'11" girl, like and
Listen,
he's there.
Morgan Freeman can play any role he wants. The guy's a
True,
genius.
true.
I was actually thinking more like Matthew McConaughey.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Where
Yeah.
he's like, all right, all right. Did you read his book, by the
Yeah.
way, Green Light?
Green lights, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
great book.
saw it was a podcast. I
Yeah.
just no, no, sorry, it's a storybook. Not
Yeah,
story.
yeah, no, I have the
Audible.
book. I could give it to you if you want, but it's awesome and like I read it in his voice though, like in my head, it
Yeah.
was like in his voice.
Oh, I mean, we had this. So we drove from Ohio to Miami. It was like an 18-hour drive. So we were told by some friends from LA, they were like, "Oh, you have to listen to this Audible, like Green Lights from Matthew McConaughey. Or it's just phenomenal." And honestly, in the theme of this message about we're saying about like how to like stand out in a competitive job market, and we went through all those lists, but with the idea of like persevering, because you're not always going to get the answer you want, and just keep going, keep going. I would recommend this Audible, read a book, whatever you prefer. The Matthew McConaughey Greenlight is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It really puts things in perspective. Like when
Yes.
you see his journey of life, it's not going to be like for like all the time, but it's relatable as far as like it's not like you were woke up from your mother's womb and said, "Oh, I'm going to become an executive search." That doesn't happen. Like you went through hurdles, you went through different things, you go through different stuff. So it's like it's in a phenomenal kind of perspective of life, I would say.
Yep, I agree. I agree. I definitely recommend that book to anybody,
Yeah.
especially on the job market. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, look, this has been really insightful. Thank you, Gianna, so much for joining us today. Guys, this is Leadership Delivered. Good luck with your search, and please reach out if there's anything that we can assist you with.
You've just listened to another episode of MSearch's Leadership Delivered. To learn more and connect with us, click below or head to our website at msearchadvisory.com.